interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
I'm back. That still has a nice beat to it. Still seated twerking to bounce. New year, and that song still has a vibe in 2025. Also, it's time for a new intro. I am in with a podcast change. I added the F.A.A.F.O to it, but I'm back with the same formula that has allowed me to be successful in the past. I've set realistic intention. I plan on being present and following through, but I still intend to remain petty and hold grudges. Not all intentions need to be positive. Also, I will be unengaged and unbothered by people and things in my life that do not serve me. That means parasitic people, unsolicited judgments, biased newspapers, and mainstream banks. I will not apologize for maintaining my mental peace. Happy and unbothered and at peace because I'm at unbothered. All day, every day, being unbothered is my way. Join me. Butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high. So take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. I can go anywhere. Where's to know and where's to grow, a temporal rainbow. I can be anything. So take a look, it's in a book, a temporal rainbow. A temporal rainbow. A temporal rainbow. I was today years old when I became a fan of my own show. The way I record by using Logic Pro, I basically record each episode into segments, which I found that after almost 350 episodes, I actually have enough content to do compilations and then rearrange those segments that make sense. Although I doubt that I'm going to participate in the novel writing challenge, as it were, for this month, I probably will be continuing to work on Twin Destiny, which is my AI generated videos about the twins, Kochu and the other little girl. Can't remember. But anyways, as well as completing the first draft of Trickster A Parable, my take on Octavia Butler's sci-fi series, Parable, a continuation of Parable of the Talent. This is the next installment of that. And that is why I decided to create a compilation of my work on that for the past maybe 4 or so odd weeks, starting out with the original prologue as well as rewriting it and then reading it on this particular podcast, as well as some other work I've done about expanding the character and reintroducing the character of her father from Parable of the Talents. I think it's going to be a wild ride, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Now for the compilation of Trickster A Parable, and thank you for listening. So this is the novel writing month, and I'm closing in on the end of the Trickster A Parable, my take on Octavia Butler's Parable series. She only lived to see the publication of 2. There was probably a series of 6 or 7 books that were planned. And then she passed away after a pretty bad fall. I think if the internet had been interneting and she had known and had the use of a good AI tool, she would have been able to finish the series in her own manner. I took a stab at it. I think I never will have her voice, but through her ideas, I have created my own voice, and I hope I've created something that she would be proud of. Different, not her, but still proud. I'm getting to the point where I think I'm coming up towards the end and planning for the next series. I'm not even sure if anyone would like it outside of myself, but I'm still going to give it a try. That's what life and creation is all about, creating something that you would read and that would be entertaining for others. Along that line is an expansion upon the concept of Earthseed. This is a community born out of necessity, where Lauren Olamina, as a teenager, created this concept of God as change because the fixed God of her father and of Christian America was not, or it did not give the salvation and the promise that her conceptualization of God. It doesn't negate or subvert Roman Catholicism, Judaism, Hinduism. It's just non-hierarchical, and it's a way to look at look at and deal with the chaos that was surrounding them. This makes it a little bit easier, and out of it, it's intentional seeking peace and ability to survive. One of the things that I've realized too, that I don't think we're going to be able to escape this earth by messing it completely up. Yes, I think society is going through a big shift. We are definitely in the age of Aquarius. And we got to learn how to deal with chaos and difference and change. Things can't stay static. People can't use power and use religion and race and dogma to subjugate everyone. Power is corruptible. And what does it matter if you're poisoning yourself and others? It does not make any sense. Also, I want to just reiterate that the concept of change and this Earthseed community and the philosophy is fictional. It would be looked upon as heresy to create something like this in the Christian America of the book, but this is a fictional guidance. This creation is based on some true facts, like, for example, survival, Earthseed. That's the whole thing. Also, I've done research or took several religion classes and did one of my final research papers by attending Catholic church services and buying a rosary at one of the cathedrals in Canada. And I've actually got the beads to actually make my own Earthseed Rosary. And with the use, and I was able to create an actual Earthseed Rosary prayer. I hope people don't consider this heresy, but it's just an expression, a meditative expression of this fake religion. Take it as that and take it as art, what I have made up. It has nothing to do with, no, I'm not trying to create some type of cult. No, I'm not doing that at all. All of this is fictional. It's not heresy. It's just a different thought process, a meditative thought process. And I check it out, and I hope you like it. the beliefs that I want to create in for this abstract or fictional religion is based off of laws of physics, biology, and sociology. And it's kind of built into like a spiritual framework. The core tenets provide the moral and practical blueprint for a self-sustaining and a constantly evolving community. This rosary is not static. It's something that is going to be built upon, hopefully, as I continue or am allowed to continue with the parable series. The central tenet is God is change, God is infinite, irresistible, and eternal. God is not fixed and not static like conventional religion. This God is the ultimate reality of the universe. Suffering, destruction, and loss are not punishments or some random events, but these are a manifestation of God. And it evokes change, and the change itself is God. You have to prepare for it, you have to study it, and you have to shape it. Our role with this change is not passive. Our destiny is to eventually see the stars, but we got to be able to survive here on Earth. Just like one of the characters in the book, Phoenicia Baxter said this: ain't nobody trying to survive the struggle here on Earth and to take that mess, that ish, into the stars. Why do we always have to be on the struggle bus? Ain't nobody got time for that. We got a lot to basically figure out here before we can even make it up there. Every action while we are down here is to that end, because that's our destiny. Change is constant, necessary, and fluid. There's a paradox when you can hold two opposing ideas simultaneously. There's the inevitability of chaos, and simultaneously you work ruthlessly to create order and security. Security is temporary but necessary for the collective to adapt effectively. Water is powerful in this. It's essential for life, yet it's fluid and it's constantly shifting. It can't be contained just by any single vessel for long. That's why this community has to master water reclamation, not being wasteful. Always, knowledge is power. Change is driven by data and verifiable reality. That's why knowledge in blockchain, coding, and quantum computers are not just technological assets. It's the instrument used to map the face of God and to predict movements. For all of us to survive, we all have to be physically connected, not just to the pain of others, but also to the happiness of others for the collective good. This is the necessity of all of us reaching our eventual destiny in those stars. What can we do to help society and each other now is what is going to propel us even faster and safely to populate the stars and to continue to grow, because that is the bottom line for our destiny. Not just this fake community, but overall, just humanity in general. Embrace it, meditate upon it, and let us all grow. I have ended my PTO, and I decided that I was going to go ahead and record this part of the podcast. And for my birthday, first, let's just start there. I've never taken this much time off from my corporate job, and it was so greatly needed. And I'm happy that I did it. Let's go on from there, okay? I had the opportunity to also get the one of a autobiography or a book about um, the life and times of Octavia Butler or Positive Obsession, Susanna Morris. The link to the my bookshop far from Beale Street dropped on the 19th. I was able to pick it up for my birthday, and this was the first time I did something that I hadn't done in a while. I actually went into Barnes and Noble, picked up this book, as well as Sun Tzu's Art of War. Bought a coffee, bought the New York Times, even though I had been boycotting it since 2024, and just sat there and read the paper like I was Carrie Bradshaw in Chattanooga. It was dope. But I've been and I had already read um, Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, as well as finished the Parable of the Talents, and I've been going back to it. And then it's widely known, and they also talk about her starting and stopping Parable of the Trickster multiple times before her death uh, back in 2006. She was suffering from debilitating writer's block. And if she had lived just a few more years, she would have saw the unfortunate shuttering of the shuttle program, NASA shuttle program, the rise of SpaceX, Blue Origin, and of cryptocurrency. And I'm not sure how she would have meshed all of that into her near future space uh, science fiction, but she would have had a written about and just basically dove into President Obama. And I think I've been going back and forth between uh, writing in a section about a Black president or just having someone on the ilk of Stacey Abrams or Keisha Bottoms, Keisha Lance Bottoms, or even former Vice President. I could see her, former DA in California. If she had gone as low as she wanted to with this crooked weave fool, I think um, the former vice president, she would have actually been elected because it wasn't tolerated. But I still don't think that we were in the right amount of place to accept that from a Black woman when we're using in the guise of um, Gavin Newsom, um, Kamala Harris, I'm sorry, Vice President Kamala Harris, even though she could have gotten him and gathered him all the way together, but I guess that when we go low, we go high crap. And Gavin Newsom is using a younger Hispanic woman to write and manage his social media platforms because he's dragging the cricket weave felon every single day, and I'm all here for it. But why wouldn't it have been tolerated if Kamala Harris had did the same, or Stacey Abrams had did it now with and gotten that fool down in Georgia all the way together? You know what we will accept, and we've seen him basically implode and make a run on our democracy. What is it going to take? He's going to crash it, but I think we are not going to be able to continue to fan dance. Black women in general are going to have to come back up. It's like how we're going to show up. I think we're going to have the economic means to show up the way we want to and when we want to. And that's why I bring all of those things up to say it's because I've decided um, and see if it's going to be accepted, because I don't think uh, Octavia Butler would have accepted me this because it's not her voice, it is her idea. I'm just running with it, and I'm using a fair amount of AI, not only to assist with writing the different chapters and creating video, but also I think AI did a very good job based on how I instructed it to create the book art, because I've renamed this the Trickster A Parable because I don't have any permission from her estate or Huntington Library. I'm just going off from the notes that I've read online, combination of what her books, how she, and also because I wanted to tap a couple of loose ends. I think it would have made it even more interesting if it could have been that, because I always suspected that Marcus and what happened really happened to her father. It wasn't necessary to the plot line of Parable of the Talent, but I honestly think that what happened to their father, we didn't even know his name. I gave him a name. His name is going to be Jacob Olamina. How he basically finds Marcus, what his life was after, because um, Jacob was actually sold in my book, The Trickster A Parable. He was actually sold into slavery, discovers Marcus, and they conspire to go against Lauren, because they have, as you know, in the time of the uh, Christian America, when they were at their maximum power, they were named as a cult. In the latter part of Parable of the Talents, they basically, the farm that is the first earth seed or acorn basically gets overrun and becomes a concentration or prison camp. Um, and I always suspected, although it was never confirmed in Parable of the Talents, I always wanted it or suspected that Marcus had something to do with that. He also had something to do with the kidnapping and then the illegal adoption of all of the children of Acorn. And again, it was a power trip. It was as if he was punishing Lauren for daring to have something, a thought that was so different than the state Christianity that they grew up with and that was taught by their father, that he had to get her back. But it all taught because it came back stronger. Also, and he also knew the whereabouts of Larkin, or AKA Ashavir. She basically uses her talents with the dream mask to basically, for re-education or basically brainwashing other newer people in Christian America. But also because he's gay and he never married, there was also a program very similar to the likes of Michael Jackson and Elon Musk, how, and the use of surrogate, and he would donate his sperm and he to create basically these super Christians, his own basic army. That basically, and then it it ran its course. Some of the women were excommunicated or they ran away, because they were supposed to abort any female fetuses, and several of them, like the twins, they're going to come back and they're going to basically play a role in the second acorn, the creation of and acceptance of Earthseed, as well as the proliferation of that religious thought, and also just a lot of new characters. The Jacob Olamina's new family, Marcus's half brothers. Isaac, he runs away, survives, but he assumes another identity because he doesn't want to be brought back to either another um, work camp or workhouse or back to his father, because he was always questioning, and him going to the new Acorn community or Earthseed community just makes sense from the standpoint of the storyline. But I'm going to read from you a section, and I know it does have a lot of work to do, but I think it could be frightening when you think about just how good Gemini or even Chat GPT is. But let's check it out. I have to try to make sense of this. I have to write it down if for no other reason than to get it out of my head. The mind can be a graveyard holding truths you don't want to look at, and I found the freshest, most terrible grave of all. I have spent the last 3 weeks trying to convince myself that Lila's information was incomplete, that my own empathic trauma was twisting the facts. But God has changed, and the truth is a thing that will not stay buried. It began with the scouting party we sent out, not the one that found the old communiques, but a new group, a team of 6. They were tasked with tracing the last known trajectory of my brother's group. I'm going to have to actually change that verbiage because I think maybe I'll keep it that way. Um, and I really don't want Christian America to go on the run. I'm going to have to rethink this, but anyways. The first series of salvage data chips from a destroyed settlement on the outskirts of what used to be San Diego. The second was a prisoner, a young man no older than 30, who called himself a brother in Christ. He was a true believer, filled with feverish, almost manic certainty. Maybe that's how I'll come to it, because they have a good run, the pox is over, and then Jared does not get reelected and he dies of liver failure. So maybe the when as Christian Americas, they not only their influence wanes, they actually go on the run and try to establish that would make sense. And that's why he and his children were to disappear. That makes more sense. Okay. And you got to go through all of these hiccups before they can even actually make it out to Trappist. Because these type of people can hold you back from scientific discovery. You know what I mean? But anyways, I was the one to interrogate him, not because I was the best, but because I was the only one with empathy to know if he was lying. And he wasn't. The truth he carried was something I had to endure. He talked for hours, his voice a drone, a mix of religious fever and simple, terrifying fact. He spoke of the great leader, the man who had brought them from the wasteland to this promised land. Not Marcus, he spoke of my father. Huh. He's a vessel of the Lord, the young man said, his eyes wide and unblinking. He was a slave, a holy man condemned to servitude, but a true servant of the Lord. He was a preacher and anointed one, and the Lord saw fit to deliver him from bondage and put him on the throne. My what is this? This is stupid. I ain't using this. Yeah, I'm gonna have to reread this. I don't like this at all. And I thought the part that I had actually put in my let's see. Okay, this is the actual one that I actually liked. I have to write this down or it will consume me, the weight of it, the poison. For so long, I believed it was enough to have simply survived, to have rebuilt, to have reached the stars. I thought Earthseed had, by its very existence, cleansed itself of old world toxins. This sounds more like it. We built a home on a new planet, a new way of life. We raised a new generation, born into a world of possibility instead of a world of pain. I told myself that the past was just that, the past. A memory, a scar, but a scar can hide sickness that festers beneath the surface, and in my blindness, I allowed it to grow. I've known for months, maybe years, that something was off. A subtle wrongness, a half remembered phrase from a conversation, a name that didn't quite fit a timeline. I ignored these things because the truth was a thing I couldn't bear to feel, not fully. But the truth is a debt that must be paid. The truth is change. It started with the name of woman from a newly awakened diapause family. They were the last group to wake from the Ark of Covenant's final journey. Her name was Lila Jenkins. She was a system analyst from the old world from Jerry's Capital in Sacramento. She worked on supply chain logistics and digital archiving. Her work gave her almost photographic memory of data, a skill that now seems like a gift from God. Lila had been in diapause for so long, she didn't know the specifics of what had happened to us. She only knew the stories we told of the Earthseed's community's persecution, our oral history of Acorn's fall. Yesterday, she came to me. She was helping the community archivist restore some of the old salvage data from the ship's hard drives. She found a fragmented file, a series of encrypted communiques from Jared's administration dated from 2038 and 2039, the same years that Acorn was attacked and overrun. She handed me a tablet, her face pale, her hands trembling. I took it, and the data was just a series of code and dates, nothing I could read. I need you to look at the routing number, she said, her voice a low whisper. The sender, the recipient. I looked. A series of long alphanumeric strings. I've always been more of a farmer than a cryptologist. Who do they belong to? I asked her. The recipient is the Security Subdirectorate in Christian America's Special Projects Division. The sender is something else. It's a personal encryption key. It's listed on a few other files I found. Files about intelligence gathering on subversive cults. I got its provenance traced back to specific individuals' access node in the Jarrett's administration's inner circle. I felt the first tremor then, that familiar cold wave of dread. My hyper empathy, it was always a warning. My chest tightened. And who is that individual? I asked, through my mouth felt full of dust. His name was Marcus Duran. He was a high level advisor to Jared himself. He was instrumental in providing intel on dissident groups. His records, they list him as the son of an influential Christian minister and a public figure in Christian America's youth movement. His records indicate that he had no known living relatives, no parents or siblings in the new America, but his face. It was in a data ghost of old news report from a Christian American rally. He was standing right behind Jared. His face was identical to the picture you have of your brother, that one in the community archive. I could feel the grief and shock radiating from Lila, her empathy for me. She was feeling my pain before I could even process it myself. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. I gripped the tablet tighter. My mind went back to the old memories. The days after my father's death. I'm gonna have to change that because he just went missing. The split between Marcus and me, he had gone to join Christian America to find a sense of family order in a world that had none. He had rejected my way, my truth, my God. I assumed he was just lost. But to have joined the very people who destroyed us, to have been a part of it. Show me the communications, Lila, she did one by one. Maybe I'll do it and change it to, because if we follow the storyline of uh Parable of the Talents, Lauren doesn't make it to the next world, but maybe Larkin can, even though she had this complicated relationship with her mother. I think she and the tech that she would, the woman would that would be adopted by Lauren, they would actually make the next group of people that would actually make it to Trappist E, 1E. I have to, I'm still going to have to rework this. Report on Leadership Defensive Vulnerabilities, reference Lauren Olamina, November 2nd, 2038. List of community assets, including food stores, water purification, and child relocation targets. And then it says December 20th, confirmation. He provided a list of all the children in the community with their ages. Voice barely a whisper. Your daughter Larkin she's on the list. Her name was at the top. I don't know how I'm going to do that. We found documents showing how Christian America had developed a formal program for re-education and rehoming children from subversive families. It was a state-sanctioned kidnapping and indoctrination program. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Marcus had not just given them our location, he had given them our weaknesses, names, our children. He had provided the list of those to be taken. His betrayal was not the moment of weakening. It was a career, a deliberate, long-term, calculated act of malice. See, I think they'll get a little bit further with working with diapods, but a lot of this is going to have to take place on Earth before they're even going to be able to get to the stars. A lot of things have to be fixed and dealt with. That's why I'm going to have to rework this a little bit, because I think the trials and them getting beyond the trials are going to be key to them being able to not to things that they're going to have to get over before they're going to be able to realize their place in the stars. So I'm going to have to change this to some of the advances in science that they actually have to have here on Earth before they can actually proceed to the stars, which will still be dope, I think. For everyone that has been following me for the last couple of weeks, I have been alternating between talking about my twin destiny. My plan is, if I can get my knees under control before March and also get the money up through investments, I want to go to Korea. So I've done this historical fiction about twins separated at birth. Of course, they're girls, and of course, they go to separate from Korea to Japan. And I've learned a lot. But I've also it's continuing in the vein of Octavia Butler and her Parable series. I love Parable of the Talents. I've dug Kindred, but she died before she could actually finish the 6 or 7 book series, and she notoriously had severe writer's block. And I, born 20 years, like after she was, and having access, not only having a financially stable that I can create and then have access to the tools that will allow me to create things. I think this would have allowed her to the opportunity to continue to bless us with her creativity. I attempted to use AI to write the initial prologue of my book, The Trickster A Parable, in the vein of what she meant, because hers is a tale of a post-apocalyptic world of the pox ushered in by an administration that, quote unquote, wanted to make the world great again. Hers was from a time, she died even before some President Obama was even elected. I think that would have given her more hope. But the rot that she saw in climate warming, the go-go days of Reagan, and the dissolution of a lot of the services under the guise of Reaganomics, truly was the rant of a man with advanced Alzheimer and had no basis in economic reality. This is how she crafted her parable, and though the world of the parable based on that. A lot of it is spot on because there are some of the things that we are experiencing now is completely applicable to when she wrote this way back in the late 90s and published in 2000. What I did not want or could not use was the idea of us being on a struggle bus and still being able to get to outer space. Because what I do know is we do and have the means and access to technology that we could experiment with now that could actually stabilize the rot that is happening in our society now to allow us to go to space, because it would be a danger to basically get caught up there and have to basically wing it when we actually have the technology that we don't have to wing it. And there is a possibility to actually create a Wakanda-like society here, at least I can imagine it in my mind, because I don't want to take the same rot, the same hierarchical, racist thinking to outer space. What would be the purpose of creating Acorn or extending Acorn in the Earthseed-based community in space when we couldn't even figure out the basic needs here on Earth? Why couldn't we, in our smaller community, and not have to struggle to have clean water, clean air, and uncontaminated food? You know what I mean? So that was one of the reasons why I had the idea to basically rewrite the prologue and using the tools that were not available and access to other concepts that were not even available to Octavia Butler back in 2003, 1990 or 2000, when this book was first actually, the Talents, Parable of the Talents was actually written. And it also, I think, gives it a new dynamic. And it also gives me a focus to, again, take us from the struggle bus to create a world that is, I would think, is completely plausible. And how would you use the tools in an ethical and a good way to be able to let society and society as a whole advance? Sometimes you got to implode it to actually rebuild it, and to rebuild it in a way that actually makes sense, using the tools that you have available to you in a positive way. Also, giving grace to those that hold on to the old way and can't adapt, and looking at, because that's what a parable, it actually teaches you a lesson. If you hold on to the ways and you're not able to adapt, this is what happens. Either you get annihilated or you basically swing the opposite way. Either way, there's a punishment and there is a reward for your inability to adapt with change. Not all chaos is bad, just like not all chaos is good. It's somewhere in the middle, and you can just adapt and adapt in a positive way. So here we are with the new prologue from my version, The Trickster, A Parable. From our subterranean sanctum, the world above was not a constant hum of chaos, but a carefully curated stream of data. The truth was not what was reported, but what was concealed. The official news agencies, NPR, or even Associated Press long since buckled under the Jarrett's administration's pressure by defunding and incarceration of anyone considered a dissident. Promoted sensationalist distractions, gossip, celebrity crisis, and religious fervor, all designed to cover up the real story. The slow, agonizing collapse of the food chain and the horrific expansion of the labor camps. The Acorn Earthseed community had been one of the earliest, most tragic victims of this systemic failure. Their destruction framed as a necessary military action against renegade cultists. We use blockchain, the collab, to log the truth. Every piece of propaganda, every media blackout, every real-time data spike in the dwindling water tables was recorded, validated, and time-stamped, creating a shadow history. The world above could lie, but the immutable ledger of the collab could not. This created a strange internal paradox. The digital currency we minted, the collab, was meant to be a force for liberation, yet criminals and savvy market actors immediately co-opted the system. Jarrett's administration, in a panic effort to keep the economic system afloat, tried to use our technology to validate their own failing currency, ironically adding a layer of transparency that ultimately hastened their demise. Jarrett himself had become obsessed with using our technology to gain ultimate power, pouring resources into government quantum labs. Still, he was losing the war not to us, but to the crazed homicidal fanatics within his own ultra-conservative base, who saw technology as a heathen tool and his own government as weak. One day, while monitoring the unsecured transmission loops, a burst of raw, unfiltered data ripped across our screens. A video feed from a low-grade satellite that the government thought had been decommissioned years ago. The quality was poor, grainy, and flickering, but the message was horrifyingly clear. We were looking directly into the mess hall of a real red mill facility, one of Elon Bezos' corporate workhouses. The scene was pure pandemonium. Guards in their corporate red trim were trying to hold a line against a surging, emaciated crowd of workers. There was no riot over freedom, no protest against slavery. This was a fight for simple survival. The usual meal of protein paste had been delivered short, drastically short. We watched the desperation turn instantly into violence as men and women clawed at each other over nutrient tubs. Run analysis, I ordered, my voice tight. Correlate with red mill harvest logs. Jackson, Pollock, J.P. Brown, running the quantum computing processes worked swiftly. It's worse than we thought, Tash. I think I need to add running the worked swiftly. The voice activated commands more rapid than any keyboard. So this is like kind of like Siri on crack. But anyways, it's worse than we thought, Tash. The logs show the largest rice and bean harvest in 3 quarters was taken from the facility yesterday. They've been stripped bare. And where did the harvest go? Corpus records show it was routed directly to Christian America Central Distribution Hub in voice-activated commands and digital outreach. How can it says I movement translated more rapidly than any keyboard. Okay. Then we strip bare. And where did the harvest go? Corporate records show it was routed directly to the Christian American Central Distribution Hub in Oklahoma, a gift from Bezos to Minister Duran, probably for political protection. The connection was stark. The workhouses were being starved to feed the religious zealotry of Christian America, trading life for political stability. It was an appalling display of the New World's economy, human flesh traded for political dogma secured by corporate greed. But the story wasn't over. The transmission jump, now we were watching a convoy of trucks, clearly marked with Christian America, cross and stylized eagle, moving fast along a dilapidated stretch of I-40. The trucks full of red mill harvest were intercepted. The interception was brutal but efficient. A group of masked riders, not government or corporate mercenaries, but independent scavengers, outlaws, swarmed the convoy. They didn't take the trucks. They offloaded the crates and barrels, transferring them to their smaller, faster vehicles. The food meant for devoted members of Marcus Duran's community was being stolen. Track the new routing, I commanded, my hands, my eyes darting across the terminal. The data returned a grim answer. The stolen food wasn't being used to feed another Earthseed commune or any other humanitarian effort. It was being sold. Black market, Tash, JP confirmed, shaking his head. They're dumping it on the local gray markets in what used to be Memphis. High price, untraceable. This food is going to the rich and the opportunists, not the desperate. The hypocrisy was sickening. Christian America, preaching order and self-sufficiency, was wholly dependent on the slave labor of workhouses. In turn, its own supply lines were so weak they were being raided by common criminals. The system was eating itself alive. Their fixed world was a complete lie. We are witness the final, brutal truth of the Pox era. The collapse of centralized power created not just chaos, but a vacuum that anyone, whether a black market trader or a trickster prophet, could exploit. This chaos, this failure of the old world order, was the fertile ground in which Earthseed was even able to survive. The more the surface world fell, the more vital our subterranean self-sufficiency, our digital collab, and our hydroponic gardens became. We were a tiny, living island of order in a sea of unraveling lies. This goes to what I created as an introduction. A trickster can take many forms for good or not. The seemingly random nature of God's change highlights that change isn't always good or predictable. Sometimes it takes on a destructive, trickster-like form as seen in the societal collapse, environmental disasters, and the violent conflicts of Octavia's post-apocalyptic parable novels. The trickster's lessons are about adaptability, outsmarting a rigid system, and using cleverness to survive. This is precisely what Larkin, Lauren's kidnapped daughter, Natasha's collab community, and Lauren Amina and her followers must do to survive. The trickster's chaotic nature reflects the world's collapse, and the trickster's cleverness is a core quality of the characters who manage to survive it, for good or for bad, right? I also wanted to make a clear demarcation into the difference between the world of old, because I think it's Parable of the Talents, where Lauren's father basically dies or he comes up missing, and we never really find out what happened to him because a body was never found. But I bring him back up as when you hold on so tightly to the old ways, what happens, what could actually happen to you. I wanted to make that, I start out with that stark comparison between him and what, and to basically intertwine how Marcus Duran, Lauren's brother, basically gets survives the decimation of their walled neighborhood, and then he gets sold into sex slavery, and then he becomes a high up in the preachers, high up in Christian America's regime. Then he himself basically sells out his own sister, and to get her labeled a heretic only because he wants to be the man in Christian America. He basically sells the community out and gets her child kidnapped. And to basically the how the community of the collab was actually available, and even though they were literally underground and off grid, the intellectuals, that it could have been a place where if he hadn't held so closely to conventional religion, he basically could have not only saved his own family, but the rest of that community. They wouldn't have gotten burned out. I basically address what a lot of the loose strings I thought was in the Parable of the Talent, and basically how it became full circle, and how using the technology that we know now can actually build a Wakanda-like world that could allow us to eventually get to the stars, and probably get there faster, and probably not have to be on the struggle bus, because we at every single stage of our advancement, we would work out the kinks to be able to advance. That is how I see it. And even though by hiccups and there with war and rumors of war, we still can actually progress. I think the future for a truly advanced society is really probably in the stars. But we can't take the old world into the new world, or any such possible mistakes as that would allow our filtration system and our food sources to actually be destroyed. Ain't nobody got time for that. And ain't nobody, and it is not, you can still have conflict and a suspension of disbelief without having to be on the struggle bus. But that's just my style. This is based on an idea of Octavia Butler, and I think it is I'm just trying to further it, but it's not, I don't write like her, I don't sound like her, and I have access to things now that she didn't have access to, and as I learn the tools, hopefully I can put out a better product. And I hope you would actually stay with me as I continue not only participating in the novel writing challenge, but also creating a product that other people would want to read. I'm about 41,000 words down, a little over 9,000 more plus to go. I hope I do a good job. I just want to do a good job of relating a story that allows people you can be entertained, but you can embrace change and make change work for you. You know what I mean? And still enjoy life, and still it's so much more than, life is just so much more than what you could actually make it. You're only limited by your ability or inability to experience it, I think. every time I think of something, I am completely surprised by how my idea intuitively, or not so much intuitively, they merge. I'm still working on the Trickster A Parable, and how I always am just completely blown away about what Octavia Butler wrote in the 80s, how it still applies to now, and how far it seems like the more far that we think we're getting, we still are doomed to repeat some of the stupidness of before. And that's where I find the age of Aquarius being a part of a trope that has everything to do with what the age that we're in now. And again, this is from the 60s. Why age of Aquarius? And I'm writing about the Trickster and talking about Octavia Butler, because it's more than just the ropey-dopiness of the 60s. It has to do with a shift. In astrological terms, no, this is not built in true science, but some of the meaning of fantastical and magical belief we use now, or have developed science to prove that. For example, there is a procession of equinoxes when you talk about the age of Aquarius. It takes about 26,000 years to complete that cycle. And it's also when the Earth axis wobbles. It means that there is a point where the sun rises on the vernal equinox, the first day of spring, and slowly shifts backwards through the 12 constellations of the zodiac. The time it takes for the equinox to move through one constellation is an astrological age. It's about 2160 years. Let's see, that would put us, we're about, 80 years, almost 100 years. I actually need to build that into my story. Because it lasts approximately 2160 years. So in 2160, that should probably be the time that truly we should be moving out of, or that should be the, in starship years, or in the years of the Trickster, that we can actually use that to our advantage, about when we finally reached the Trappist. But I digress. We are currently believed to be transitioning out of the age of Pisces, marked by dogma, organized religion, sacrifice, and hierarchies, and into an age of Aquarius. It's a time where culturally there's a shift beginning. And when you're talking about this shift, this wobble, it has implications because we see a complete, or is coincident with the complete breakdown of what we know as society, because it's okay. But I can also see people completely losing their freaking minds about something just so wild, where censorships, you can't be prejudiced, and then you can't fall back onto what worked only for a small group of people. You basically have to embrace the change. It could mean a little bit of chaos, but with the chaos comes order and the advancement of society. And I think that's the whole principle of this world building that Octavia Butler was trying to do. And in the world that she was in, she didn't fit in, because I think she was on some newer age-ish. And I'm going to always go back. If she could have conquered her anxiety or gotten control of her blood pressure and everything that actually went with it, she would have actually been able to use AI and the technology afforded by this new age to basically advance this message. And that's all I want to do. I want to advance how to embrace. It seems like everything is chaotic and people are becoming stupider and allow themselves to become stupider and basically act on all of these dark things that they've been wanting to for a number of years. And they don't care. They just want what feels familiar and what was accepted. But what was accepted, that hierarchical, paternalistic BS, has no place in a new age of where we all can go forward. And the old things that we thought separated us and we should be hierarchical, that those things don't matter. And that's why the collaboration of Natasha, Marcus, and Sarah in the Trickster, I think, is going to be my basis in developing how this group, and even with Olamina, Lauren, how this group of misfits are going to come together to basically guide us to and through this new age of Aquarius. It doesn't mean that somebody has to win or lose. How about if we all win and we all were advanced? There's always going to be a push and pull, old versus new, old guard versus new guard, dogma, religion versus the acorn and earthseed. And we also have to get some semblance of stability here on Earth before that message can even get the technology that can be used to get to the Aquarian constellation. Because that's pretty dope, don't you think? So here we go. This is a continuation of Chapter 8. Fragments of Experience, Natasha, Marcus, and Sarah in the Engines of Progress. Disillusion in the Halls of Power. I think this is actually from Natasha's perspective. We watched as our world became a place of new censorships, of old prejudices, and of new brutal forms of racism. Natasha's years at Alphabet began in the cathedral-like quiet of a campus dedicated to the future, a place where every wall was glass and every hallway pulsed with the promise of omniscient code. It was during these heady, uncertain days when the world outside trembled with upheaval and the halls of power grew ever more remote that I met him. An African-American man whose physical presence seemed to bend light around him, towering broad shoulders with a wit as quick as the quantum leaps he studied. He was not easily overlooked. Some whispered he looked more like Megatron than any mortal scholar, but behind the mythic frame was a mind honed by 2 doctorates, one in quantum mechanics, one in computer science. Our first encounter was at a coffee stand on Alphabet campus where the baristas pull espresso shots with algorithmic precision and engineers cued in silent, caffeinated devotion. I was clutching a stack of printouts, lost in a storm of calculations, when he appeared beside me. A gravity unto himself, he asked about my notes with a curiosity that cut through my guardedness, and I answered with an uncharacteristic candor. We spoke for hours, the hum of invention swirling around us, our ideas colliding and fusing into something neither of us had expected. From that serendipitous meeting, a partnership blossomed, not only in code and theory, but in life. As our rebellion against the machinery of empire gained momentum, so did our love, fierce and improbable. We built a family in the shadow of our work, children whose laughter echoed through the abandoned corridors, whose future stretched out before us like uncharted territory. He became both anchor and catalyst, not just a fellow architect in our underground world, but a father whose wisdom and strength shaped our sanctuary into a home. Our relationship was a testament to the promise that technology, for all its complexity, was ultimately a human endeavor, forged in connection and sustained by hope. Together we unraveled the old codes and wrote new ones, sifting through the ashes of the past to plant seeds for a future where our children and all children might one day inherit a world unshackled from logic of extraction. She was drawn to the idea of free information, of algorithms as benevolent architects, shaping a world of human knowledge. She worked late, her fingers stained with the glow of 1,000 Google Docs, unraveling mysteries of natural language and data compressions. I'm assuming I'm talking about Natasha, but okay. Her best work was buried underneath the weight of compliance, of risk management, of legalese, and quarterly earnings calls. The open source vision, she believed it was traded for proprietary obfuscation, and Natasha grew silent. She left Alphabet not with fanfare, but with a quiet rage, the realization that the future she helped build was being weaponized against its creators. Marcus's journey through Meta was a fever dream in high resolution, an endless stream of avatars, feeds, and virtual rooms where reality itself seemed malleable. He had come to the company as a cryptography prodigy, hoping to use his skills to safeguard privacy and empower digital communities. His as a fever dream in high resolution. I can get rid of that. I like going through this and realizing what all I don't. Meta's promise was seductive, a borderless social world, connection without constraint, the democratization of voice. Marcus buried himself in protocols and architecture of decentralized identity and the mathematics of trustless communication. As our collective vision deepened, his influence radiated outward, drawing in others whose restless intellects and unyielding idealism had outgrown the boundaries of their allotted roles. Engineers, cryptographers, renegade economists, and artists orbiting the periphery of sanctioned progress found themselves converging on our underground sanctuary, each carrying their own fragments of disillusionment and hope. This gathering was not accidental. It was as if the secret frequency of our rebellion, transmitted through whispers and encrypted code, had beckoned those hungry for more than incremental change. Their backgrounds were varied. Some had defected from government research, others from the private sector, while a few were self-taught visionaries who had always thrived outside of institutions. Each arrival added new momentum, and in the crucible of shared ambition and loss, the boundaries between us and them dissolved. Together, he and his colleagues, then expanding to Natasha and then Sarah's collective, established the initial innovation incubator, not as a sterile space of post-it notes and pitch decks, but a living engine of invention pulsing with risk and possibility. The incubator became our collective workshop, laboratory, and forum. Here, old hierarchies were dismantled. Authority came not from title, but from contribution. And the ideas were tested not for market fit, but for their power to reshape reality. The first projects were wild and speculative: decentralized networks for autonomous governance, open source algorithms for secure communication, new syntaxes for human-computer dialogue. There was a spirit of play, but also of urgency. We were fugitives from the logic extraction, architects of something unclaimed by empire. Our innovation was not funded by venture capital, but by the billion Bitcoin seed, by barter, by pool labor of passionate minds. Marcus his knack for synthesizing the desperate threads of expertise into unified ventures inspired respect and loyalty. The incubator grew not only in numbers, but in vision. Our experiments transcended the technical. We began to imagine social architecture that could support true autonomy, economies of reciprocity rather than extraction, and networks of trust. Actually, I'm going to make this. And with it, Natasha. I'm going to actually make this. Natasha. Her knack for synthesizing desperate. It grew. What began as clandestine gatherings of descenders was evolving into a movement, a loose but resilient network of innovation cells, each connected through our underground city and our shared commitment possibility. I think I'm hoping I already talked about Christian America, and they actually had gone underground, but I'll get to that. They end up at area 58 or 59. But anyways, Marcus saw the machinery of extraction. Every click, every interaction, every heartbeat of data was siphoned and fed into a vast unseen ledger of behavioral prediction. The tools he designed for privacy were reshaped into tools for profit. The utopian ideas of digital democracy curdled into the reality of algorithm propaganda and surveillance. Marcus fought for transparency, for accountability, for the encryption of our user agency, and was met with polite nods and 1,000 forms of delay. The culture of innovation was a mask for consolidation. By the time he walked away, Marcus was no longer the idealist who believed in technology as liberation. His time at Meta left him raw and restless, angered by the transformation of technical brilliance into social control. Sarah's time at JPL, then SpaceX, was marked by her fierce devotion to the unknown, the wild, unbounded frontier of outer space. At JPL, she was surrounded by the relic of past triumphs, mission patches, faded photographs, and the quiet hum of deep space telemetry. She was the part of teams that mapped new planets, who worked in the language of orbital mechanics and the poetry of signal noise. There was a purity in the work, a sense of collective purpose that transcended bureaucracy. But even as she contributed to the building of rovers and the launching of satellites, Sarah felt the institutional rot at the edges. The politics of funding, the competition for prestige, the endless cycle of budget cuts and PR campaigns. The work became less about discovery and more about survival. When she transitioned to SpaceX, she hoped for renewal, for a revolution in the way humanity approached the cosmos. The company was fast, chaotic, flush with resources and ambition. But the dream of democratized space was quickly subsumed by the reality of corporate empire. Innovation was prized, but only as far as it served the cult of personality and the drive for market dominance. Her ideas for open, collaborative exploration were absorbed into the machinery of profit and spectacle. Sarah emerged from these experiences changed, her optimism scorched by the knowledge that even the stars could be colonized with the old systems of power. Her anger was not just personal, but generational, a fury at the true invention and collective possibility were continually subverted by the logic of extraction. Together, Natasha, Marcus, and Sarah carried their disillusionment into the next chapter, into the makeshift control rooms and abandoned labs where they dreamed of something new. Their anger became a crucible, forging the resolve to build not just for themselves, but against the systems that had betrayed them. It was this shared sense of loss and the stubborn hope that technology could still be subversive, communal, and free that fueled their rebellion, their invention, and their enduring refusal to be erased by the machinery of empire. Our work went from theoretical to practical. We needed a place, a sanctuary, a new kind of fortress. We found it in the heart of the desolate desert, in a place that had long been a myth, a legend, a place, Area 51, of government secrets and alien conspiracies. In the shadow of Area 51, surrounded by abandoned machines and the ghost of government secrecy, we built a new kind of contraband, one that didn't destroy but created, one that offered possibility, not escape. Our little group, our small band of academic rebels began to grow. We found others who saw the same thing we did, artists, philosophers, and other brilliant minds who were being systematically erased from the public discourse. We were a secret society, a quiet network of dissenters, all connected by a single powerful belief that the God of change was the only God that mattered. Okay. That change. Because I want Lauren to basically verbalize about becoming a religion and God. She is going to do that. That change was all that mattered. The place had a notorious reputation, methods of extraterrestrial research, and a secret history of government projects that had long been a part of the American psyche. But the reality was far more mundane. The government had abandoned it, not for lack of funds, but for a lack of purpose. The Clinton administration and its drive for efficiency had dissolved much of the funding that had been diverted to these types of black projects. This, coupled with the increasing privatization of the space program, meant that the government's interest in vast hidden underground facilities had waned. It was not a place of aliens, but of forgotten government research. We found an interconnected network of tunnels and abandoned labs, a perfect subterranean womb for our new kind of society. The most valuable discovery was a series of unsecured first-generation IBM supercomputers. These were early massive mainframes left to gather dust, but still containing vast unencrypted caches of data. This was the basis of our work, the physical hardware that would allow us to build on our theoretical knowledge. We used the old machines to possess our complex algorithms, and with their data, we began to build a foundation for a new kind of quantum computer, and we had the means to do it. The transition from thesis to practice was more than a technical leap. It was shedding of old skins. In the dim-lit quarters beneath Nevada sand, the abstractions of whiteboard and code took on a grit of lived experience. Our theories, once academic exercises argued over in USC's lecture halls and late-night diners, were given form, shaped by necessity and a deep-seated refusal to rebuild the broken machinery of the old world. And that is the dope end to where I'm going to leave this particular part of the episode. And join me next time as I take up when they first minted Bitcoin, because I think you'll enjoy it, and how it all is going to coalesce into the single thought of the trickster. But this is the beginning of Earthseed, even before Earthseed. It's going to be dope. It's going to be real dope, I think, at least. The year 2009 was a paradox. The pox was not yet the pox. The world was still a fragile, deceptive illusion of order, of fixed systems and predictable futures. On the surface, the internet was a tool for connection and commerce, but beneath it, A darker, more fluid reality was already taking shape. In this pre-pox world, let me just go back, correct this as I'm going along. In the cold, sterile hum of a computer lab at the University of Southern California, that my friends and I began to build a new kind of world. My name is Natasha Sanderson. I was a PhD candidate, a girl from Oakland who had found her way into the world of quantum computing and theoretical physics. My dissertation defense was a week away and I was drowning. The problem was a monster: how to create a secure, verifiable ledger of computations for a theoretical quantum computer. The calculations were so complex, so vast, that any single point of failure would bring the whole system crashing down. We, a community, needed a way to communicate and to validate, to secure information without central authority. I'm going to change that. We, the collab community. Collab for short. Needed a new way to communicate, to validate, to secure the information without a central authority. Naturally, the solution to every urgent problem, whether in the halls of academia or the shiny towers of finance, was always the same. Trust the central authority. Put all your faith in the benevolent bureaucracy, the all-seeing dean, the omniscient bank manager, or whatever institution claim ownership of your future that week. It was a comforting mantra repeated in every lecture hall and boardroom, a lullaby of anxious minds who dared not question the wisdom of the system. Of course, this raised the question: if centralization was so effective, why were the brightest minds still overwhelmed by red tape? Why did the world's wealth seem to vanish only to reappear in the pockets of a fortunate 2%? We were expected to pour our creativity into standardized form, our genius into pre-approved channels, our hopes into ledgers maintained by people we would never meet. The irony was almost poetic. The drive for decentralization wasn't born out of some radical urge to disrupt. It was the inevitable result of enduring endless committee meetings and seeing yet another secure system collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. So, when we gathered in that USC computer lab, go back and delete that big space, brainstorming ways to bypass the gatekeepers, we weren't so much rebelling as we were doing what any scientist or mathematician does best: solving the problem right in front of us. The need for decentralization in intellectual and financial sectors was only shocking to those who believed gatekeeping was a noble profession. For the rest of us, the real surprise was that it hadn't happened sooner. My team was a beautiful mess of intellectual rebellion. There was Marcus, a Jewish gay young man from Berkeley, a brilliant mathematician who had grown up watching his family's savings vanish in the dot-com bust. Marcus, a presence both comic and uncanny in our clandestine ensemble. Imagine, if you can, a white Steve Urkel. Suspenders always just a little too tight, glasses so thick they warped the light around his eyes, and an awkward grace that was as enduring as it was exasperating. Marcus's laughter could dissolve tension in the room faster than any joke, yet his intellect was so precise it bordered on unsettling. He loved books with a devotion bordering on obsession, devouring everything from cryptography manuals to chess theory to tattered science fiction paperbacks he rescued from library discards. What truly set Marcus apart, however, was his photographic memory. a rare gift that made him indispensable. He could recall not just lines of code, but the very page and syntax of obscure algorithms, tracing their evolution from academic journals to the most recent white papers. While the rest of us wrestled with the limitations of our hippocampi and caffeine-fueled intuition, Marcus was the living archive, the nervous system of our collective experiment. In late-night sessions, he could summon complex proofs and forgotten protocols at will, reconstructing the code that would become the backbone of blockchain technology and the earliest blueprints for what would later be called artificial intelligence. Without him, our patchwork of theory and ambition would have remained just that, a half-formed dream unanchored to the real humming machinery of possibility. There was Sarah from JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, that is, a quiet, methodical coder who understood the hidden language of systems. Sarah was our silent archivist, a second-generation Cambodian descendant whose life was braided together by exile in memory. Her legacy was heavy and luminous. She is the granddaughter of Hugh Nim, the revered Cambodian intellectual who had vanished into the shadowed maw of history. His voice silent by the purges of a regime that could not abide dissent. Sarah's grandmother, Melise, Hugh Nim's partner in both intellect and resistance, smuggled their infant daughter, Fela, Sarah's mother, across borders, slipping through the cracks of a world unraveling, first to Taiwan and then to the United States. She carried with her not just survival, but a stubborn hope. Sarah grew up among the scents and textures of her family's small grocery, the clangor of restaurant kitchens, her hands endlessly busy. She learned to count cash and inventory as a child, to decipher the language of customers and suppliers, always translating between worlds. In the rare quiet hours, she surrounded herself with old vinyl records, each a fragment artifact of a lost time. Khmer ballads, American jazz, Taiwanese pop, all spinning together in her bedroom. Music was her sanctuary, her cipher, a way to preserve and recompose the fragments of family history. But it was stories of escape and resistance, of grandfather Hu Nim and grandmother's perilous journey that defined Sarah. She told them late at night, sometimes over the whir of a tape deck, sometime in the hush between code and coffee. Her narratives did not romanticize the past. They revealed its wounds, its mysteries, its unyielding hope. Sarah's presence in our group was more than mathematical. She was the living memory, the bridge between generation of struggle and the newfound frontiers we tried to build. Her perspective shaped our work, reminded us that technology, like narrative, could be an act of survival and defiance. And then there was me, Natasha Sanderson, a Black woman who had been told her whole life that the world was not built for her. I am the child of a city built on double meanings, a language spoken in codes and sideways glances and numbers scrawled on slips paper and traded beneath the fluorescent hum of corner stores. Oakland, my first classroom, taught me the algebra of survival before it taught me anything else. My family's history was written in ledgers you never find in a courthouse or on a blockchain. We were Black American numbers runners, the unsung statisticians who tracked bets and odds through the veins of the city. We carried dreams and desperation in their pockets, sifting hope from chaos. My aunties knew how to make $1 turn to 10. If you listened to the night right whispers, if you trusted the right hands. I remember the scent of cheap perfume and cigarette smoke, the careful shuffle of bills, the coded knock at midnight. Each moment a lesson in risk, in probability, and faith and secrecy. But the story didn't end there. By the 80s, the city had cracked open and something else seeped through. Crack cocaine. the contraband economy that carved new borders along familiar roads. Dealers became intermediaries in an ecosystem ruled by scarcity and ingenuity. My uncles read the market by watching police cruisers and noting when conversations stopped for strangers. Contraband was more than a trade. It was a language, a calculus of need and opportunity, a testament to the brilliance bred in the crucible of exclusion. What I inherited from them was not tragedy, but a kind of code, a way to see the world as it truly was, layered, encrypted, always hiding something under the surface. When I stepped into academia, when I wandered into the clean white corridors of USC, I carried that code with me. My mind mapped possibilities the way my grandmother mapped lottery numbers, patterns and chaos, meaning in the random. The professors with their tidy equation and secure ledgers could not see the beauty in the mess, the necessity of systems built outside the law. The irony was sharp. The same skills that kept my family alive in Oakland, statistical intuition, probabilistic thinking, fluency in encrypted language, were exactly the skills that academia claimed to prize, even as it shied away from their origins. My dissertation was a secret homage, a blueprint for a ledger that could outsmart any bureaucracy. I didn't just want to decentralize computation. I wanted to decentralize the trust itself. I wanted a system that understood what it meant to survive in the shadows. When my friends and I began to sketch the outlines of the blockchain in that computer lab, I thought of the ledgers my mother kept tucked away in the kitchen cupboard, the ones written in careful pencil, numbers that meant everything to the people who risked all for a chance of something better. The war scorned these ledgers, called them criminal, but they were the records of belief of communities living on the edge of what was permitted. In the late hours, when Marcus recited proofs from memory and Sarah spun stories of exile and resilience, I remembered the calculus of the streets, the way information pulsed through the networks invisible to those in power. We weren't inventing anything new. We were translating old survival strategies into modern code. We were reclaiming what was always ours, the right to build a system that served those who felt had been left out. To be Black in Oakland was to be a statistic and a statistician, to move through a world obsessed with tracking your failures but blind to your ingenuity. My heritage was just not numbers. It was the knowledge of how to bend them, how to run them through the circuits of hope and desperation. My ancestors were contraband mathematicians, probability artists, tricksters who had learned to see through the official versions of reality. The first time our blockchain simulation succeeded, the moment the ledger validated itself without any central authority, I felt the echo of generations in that collab. The world was changing, but the trick was the same. Survive, adapt, rewrite the rules. The code we share anonymously was more than a technical breakthrough. It was an act of reclamation. It was proof that the wisdom of outlaws could reshape the future. We called ourselves midwives, not prophets, but every line of code was a prayer for those who had been erased by official histories. I'm Natasha Sanderson, daughters of numbers runners and contraband dealers. This was my inheritance, not just survival but resistance, not just memory but code. We were all outsiders in our own way, people who saw the flaws in the fixed systems and were desperate to build something better. Sarah's punk rock phase arrived on a gust of rebellion and vinyl crackle. She rolled into the lab with the salvaged turntables she had repurposed, now boasting Bose-level sound quality from the speakers. Sleeves of old albums spilled from a canvas bag, The Crash, Joan Jett, and a bootleg Cambodian garage compilation from '78. She was all wild hair and sharp boots, her energy jagged and insistent. We watched, bemused, as she set up shop in the corner by the server rack, spinning London Calling at full volume until the room vibrated with a rhythm that had nothing to do with computation. It wasn't just music, it was an invocation. Sarah's record stitched together every piece of our fractured history, forging an atmosphere electric with possibilities. The beats carved new space, punctured silence, urged us to reimagine not just the code, but the society we were trying to build. She handed out battered lyric sheets, underlying phrases about revolution, refusal, and making your own law. This is what survival sounds like, she said, grinning as we swapped vinyl sides. When you don't wait for permission. In that makeshift control room, amid the tangle of cables and stacks of cryptography books, Sarah Punk Setlist became our unofficial soundtrack. The music rawness and pushed us past caution, past second guessing into a rush of creation. I watched Marcus tap out algorithmic improvisations, translating bass lines into mathematical proofs. Sarah herself scribbled bits of codes on the backs of album covers, mapping her family's escape routes alongside the block structures of emerging ledger. We worked for months, our lives a blur of coffee, medical grade weed and code, and late night arguments. There was a moment late at night when Sarah dropped the needle on a Khmer ballad layered with discordant punk guitar, and we all felt it. That shiver at the edge of invention, the breakthrough that came from a single stroke of genius, but from a series of failures. A slow, patient process of elimination. The idea was simple, almost elegant in its simplicity. A chain, each block of data, a set of computations would be cryptographically linked to the one before it. The whole network, a decentralized, unchangeable ledger, would verify each block. There was no single point of failure, no central authority to corrupt, no God to bribe. We called it blockchain. It was a solution to a theoretical problem, a beautiful piece of academic art. We presented it at our dissertation defense. Our professors, in their infinite limited wisdom, called it a fascinating concept, a proof of a theoretical principle. The blockchain, our blockchain, began to take shape, its architecture echoing the syncopatic rebellion of the music swirling around us. Every block was a riff, every hash a chorus, every line of code a stanza against erasure. It was Sarah who insisted that the technology could be a punk act, a collective upending of old order. As the simulation finally ran, as the ledger validated itself, and the network began to hum with new potential, it was her turntable spinning in the background, her records hissing and roaring in the stillness. The birth of blockchain was not just a technical revolution, it was a punk manifesto, pressed in vinyl, electrified by memory and defiance. And when we watched the network breathe for the first time, we understood. We had just written new code. We composed a new anthem for survival. Sarah raised her fist, the chords of rebellion thrumming through every wire and every heart in the room. Her punk spirit etched into the Genesis block. But we knew it was more than that. The moment we ran the final simulation, the moment the network began to validate itself, a shared, silent realization passed between us. The quantum computer was just the beginning. The blockchain wasn't just a way to validate computations. It was a new way to transfer value. It was kind of a new kind of currency, one that could not be controlled by banks, governments, or by corporations. It was a new kind of freedom, a new kind of power, and it was in our hands. The conversation that followed was the most honest we had ever had. We spoke not as academics, but as people who watched their world fall apart, people who had been lied to and people who had been betrayed. We looked at each other, at a black woman, a white gay Jewish man, and a young woman of Cambodian descent, and we knew the truth. In a world of fixed power, A technology that gave this much financial power to the people like us would not be tolerated. The system would eventually devour the world and would never allow us to hold this kind of power. It would not be seen as a revolution, it would be seen as a crime. They would not just destroy the code, they would destroy us. So, the myth of Satoshi Nakamoto was born in that moment. It was our shield, our cipher, our ghost. We chose a Japanese sounding name, a non-gendered name, a name that could belong to anyone and no one. We decided to release the code anonymously, to put it into the world as a public good, a tool of change that would find its own way, that would adapt and grow without us. We would not be as prophets, we would be as midwives. We would watch from the shadows as the world slowly and exorbitantly began to change around our invention. We were not just protecting ourselves, we were protecting the technology, the idea, the seed. Let's see. I'm going to read the rest of this and then I'm going to stop it and just continue it on because this section is getting quite long. The years between 2008 and 2009 were a strange, feverish time. The world was at a tipping point. On the one hand, there was a feeling of a new promising future, a world of connected systems and decentralized power. The blockchain began to gain traction, a slow, quiet hum in the underbelly of the internet. It was adopted by a small, dedicated group of idealists, of anarchists, and of libertarians who saw it in the promise of truly free, borderless economy. But beneath this promise, a darker reality was rising. The rise of white nationalism was a cancer, a creeping sickness that began to infect the global consciousness. In the United States, Christian America was no longer just a fringe movement. It was a political force, a loud, angry, and unapologetic voice of ultra-conservatism. The rhetoric was a bitter, familiar song of purity and tradition, a song that I had heard my entire life. The God of my big mama and that of street ministry was that of a fixed, unchanging God, a delusion I did not share. Is a reflection of the world that was beginning to take shape. And this is where I'm going to pause and I'm just going to share that I'm continuing to work on this part of the narrative as a means of just continuing the narrative with Natasha and Marcus and Sarah and the rest of the collaborative going literally off grid and underground. I'm going to talk about, hopefully be able to talk about next week how they are going to go on and have great positive and success in their individual pursuits, but they still never lost touch with each other, and they end up taking over and expanding the actual Area 51. And I'm going to work on that with the use of AI to expand the narrative and what Area 51 came to mean in the zeitgeist of the dark economy, and when they truly took it over, how it became the nidus for change in this narrative. Also, again, I go back to if Octavia had access to the technology of AI, if she had known about blockchain and cryptocurrency, this could have been a way where she could have tokenized her story. And also she could have written about this and it would have been so dope. But she lost her battle with anxiety and her just during that fall, and the world did lose a great mind. But I'm hopeful that I could take and build upon her ideas in the next chapter of my life. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know. Drop something in the comments. Let me know how you enjoyed how this read. And thank you for listening. When I read Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler, one of the characters that I thought went left was Olamina's daughter, Larkin. If you've read that particular part of the series, Larkin was actually kidnapped from the original Acorn community, and she was actually placed for adoption. I thought that needed to be explored more because in the book, the original Parable of the Talents, she basically went on and got mad at her mother and never resolved her feelings of abandonment because she found out she was adopted and how she was adopted. And she thought her mother had given up looking for her, and they never reconciled. The tripped out part is Marcus Duran, Olamina's stepbrother, who was a minister in Christian America, basically knew where the girl was, and he kept it away from his own oldest half-sister. It was like he never had any kids. He may have gotten some disease when he was a sex slave, but that's neither here nor there. And she basically, in his mind, it seems like in the book, he basically justified his keeping the girl away from Olamina, her mother, Lauren, because she would not become conventional Christian or go back to the old ways when the old ways didn't work. And she, for whatever reason, it seems like that character, Larkin, always felt bad for her uncle Marcus, but it was more convoluted than that. And it was easier for her to take it out on her mother. It just seemed like, I thought that was a different dynamic. But just like I'm finding in the whole series is we are not going to be on the struggle out in outer space. We got to know how to not jack up this world so much. This world has to recover to a certain extent before we can actually be successful in outer space. Because you can't always be on the struggle. There has to be a way that we don't destroy this world before we go and take the same stupid stuff to the next world. We got to get it together down here so we can even get back into outer space. And that's what my whole focus is. This is also in a great timing for what was formerly NaNoWriMo. November is Novel Writing Month. Now it's called Nov Nov. And it's an opportunity to write 50,000 words, which is usually a pretty significant first chapter of a book. I am about 48,000 words now. I know that I got like about a little under 2,000 to go, but I think I'm going to be able to make that because I'm not finished yet. Like expanding the interaction between some of these characters and sussing it out to make it more cohesive. One of the characters and her coming back to her mother is going to be before the community, Acorn, and the collab or anybody else goes into outer space. So here is my take on Larkin. The reunion was not a joyful one. Marcus, tall and imposing, his face etched with the lines of a man who had seen too much sorrow, was both a mirror and a stranger. He took me in, not as a family member, but as a project. He saw the fire in my eyes, the skill in my hands, and he saw a tool, a weapon he could use. He brought me into his inner circle, his ministry, a place of order and purpose, and he told me his plan. He would use my skills with the Dream Mask to expand Christian America's re-education programs, to create a world where change was not terrifying enemy, but a controlled predictable servant. My life was no longer a dance of avoidance. It was a dance of purpose because her adoptive father was a little bit handsy and was probably more than that. At least that's what I insinuate. I had a past, a history, a family I had never known, and I had a future that was not my own. I was a pawn, a daughter, a weapon. I was Ashavir. I had just found a God that was not just in my dreams. He was in my DNA. He was in my blood, and he was waiting for me. I began to use the dream viewer to create a new kind of content, not the crude propaganda of Red Hill, but a more subtle, emotionally manipulative series of virtual experiences that reinforced my uncle's fixed God. I was his digital evangelist, a ghost in the machine shaping the minds of the next generation. My first students was Marcus's own children. They were born by surrogacy, a new generation of believers who had never known hardship. I was tasked with their re-education, using my skills to shape their minds, to make them into the perfect products of Christian America. The irony was a cold, bitter weight in my heart. The tool that had given me freedom was now being used to imprison others, including my own family, in a different kind of system. I had traded one form of bondage for another, a slavery of faith instead of a slavery of the market. I was part of a system that had created me, and as I looked at the innocent faces of my new cousins, I knew that the world had truly begun. The war had truly begun. The most profound and chilling irony of my new life was in the very heart of the Christian American philosophy. Marcus preached a gospel of freedom. He spoke of his peoples escaping the chaos of the pox, of building a new world based on fixed, unyielding God, a God that offered the ultimate security. His followers saw themselves as truly free people, liberated from a world of anarchy and uncertainty. They were a community built on a bedrock of faith and moral authority, a fortress against the moral decay that swept the world. But in the quiet moments, in the privacy of my dream viewer, I saw the truth. I saw the records of my own grandfather, Reverend Olamina, the very man I had seen on the Red Hill propaganda broadcast. I assumed he was a corporate man, a willing participant in the New World Order. But the decrypted files told a different story. He was a prisoner, a slave. The freedom he had been given was a fiction, a small comfort in a life of servitude. The programs I was using for Marcus were being developed to control and placate people like my grandfather, to make them better, more compliant slaves. My uncle, the minister of freedom, was an accomplice to my grandfather's imprisonment. I looked at the children, my cousins, whose minds I was molding. They were born in a world of physical comfort and spiritual certainty. They were not indentured in the way my grandfather was, but their souls were captive, bound by a dogma that saw change as a sin and obedience as virtue. They were being raised to be a different kind of product, a different kind of slave. The workhouses had bodies and Christian America had souls. The two systems were not in opposition. They were a cruel, symbolic whole. My uncle preached a gospel of freedom from a pulpit built on the back of my enslaved grandfather, and I, the ghost who had escaped, was now a digital slave, helping to build a new world of spiritual bondage. I was no longer a pawn, I was a trickster, and the game had just begun. I'm going to need to develop this a little bit more because I can see in the next part, this was more, I kind of get into it a little bit, and then this is how she finds out. Through the dream viewer, she finds her Uncle Marcus. He gets aware of her, kind of in alignment with the original parable of the talents, but she also goes deeper into other and forgotten about encrypted files because the security of such information devolves into chaos like much of the known American society during the period of the pox. And that's when she finds out that who her mother was at, instead of her being rescued from when they overran that community, she finds out about her kidnapping. And I don't want to that's messy in and of itself. But her journey to rejoining her mother and then becoming a part of the community that she was taught to despise is going to be telling. And I just need to work on that a little bit more. And at least I think I'm going to get about 500 to maybe 750 words just on that in itself when I rework that part of my narrative. I'm not writing the parable of the trickster. This is my, based on that narrative, Trickster A Parable. And I hope as I develop it, not only will the listening audience enjoy it, but I hope somebody will actually pick it up so it can be published in its entirety. And I'm already looking into that. I'll probably, the first edition, I'm going to publish it probably myself, self-publish it. But who knows? Maybe someone will pass this on to one of the conventional publishers and they'll pick it up. Who knows? I'm just hopeful. And I'm also enjoying what I'm doing. I also am probably going to go on hiatus and just basically use the time to focus on making money, because that was a perennial problem, basically securing income that Octavia had when she first started out and was actually in the middle of the writing of the original Parable series. But also focusing on my video as well as the script narrative for Twin Destiny, the story of Kochu and her sister, Korean twins, female twins separated at birth, one raised by Japanese expatriates, the other raised through the concubine, lesser concubine in the Korean royal family in the 16th century. That's going to take a little bit more work to do. And I plan on just maybe using this November towards those endeavors. And I just hope you guys continue to follow me as I release the video on social media, YouTube, and possibly further excerpts in my on my Dale's Angels Inc. blog. You can take the girl out of the hood, but you can't take hood music out the girl. But I'm going to end this with a word, just as I started this podcast. Do or do not do. There is no try. And that's a word from Yoda. I hope I have conveyed just how much fun I have had in creating this podcast. I've got my mojo back. Just set your intention or reset your intention. It could be daily if necessary. Mine is peace. No mental dumping over here. If I'm acting like I'm not listening, I'm probably not. I'm not your therapist. I'm not a therapist. Keep the crazy to yourself, child. You do you and leave me be. The sooner you figure that ish out, the happy you will be. So this is what I want to convey in this podcast. And that wraps another of F.A.A.F.O. has a fro. Join me next time as I throw shade and point out the shade and simply have fun. Y'all have a great new year. What, y'all, what? What?